All right, and we're back on to I'm No Expert episode 3. I got that right the second time. This is the second time that we're doing this because the first time we weren't recording our audio, which is completely fine. I mean, it's how we roll here at I'm No Expert. And today is a very special day for me because I have a really close friend of mine, a special guest, to kind of talk about like culture of Sri Lanka and how we're kind of taking that to the world. It's something we both share, a similarity that we both share. And you come from a tech background, and all of a sudden you kind of switch, you do a 360 and you switch into like clothing of all things here in Sri Lanka. You've been in Sri Lanka for the past 7 years. Why did you do that? Why are you here, changing careers from a tech guy to all of a sudden doing something that has to do with clothing?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Jason, thank you for having me and congratulations on the Emmy and all the success you're having.
Thank you.
Really proud to see what you're doing and excited to see what you're going to be doing in the next years to come. To answer your question, I mean, it's essentially belief about Sri Lanka. I think Sri Lanka could be a very developed, robust economy, great country here, and we could create a developed country, in a short period of time. And to do that, actually, you have to get thousands of people, even hundreds of thousands of people, smart people, motivated people with confidence to go build great companies. Start new things, test it out. If it doesn't work, you start again. You build out these companies, right? So that is the idea. And in order to do that, you have to believe, you have to have optimism about the future, where the country could be a great place. You have to have confidence that, you have the strength and the wisdom and the support to go build something. And that confidence needs to be rooted in being Sri Lanka. If you feel deflated about being Sri Lankan, that's not going to help. So when I looked around, I had the opportunity to kind of take a look and say, hey, how can we infuse confidence, infuse optimism, infuse hard work, innovation, entrepreneurship into our culture, into an identity, how it represents. It's LOVI is not about Sinhala or Buddhist or rich people or poor people. It's about being Sri Lankan identity that is cosmopolitan by itself.
Right.
So we are taking it to the world. People all around the world are wearing it. So the idea was to kind of create an identity that people can kind of participate and enjoy and engage, but also give them the confidence to go do great things.
Right. And identity definitely it plays a big role in like your confidence level, right? So me coming from a background of neither here nor there at first is, in the U.S. and then also being born from Sri Lanka as well, and also living here most of my life and also in the U.S. Like for me, identity was a thing that just like it fluctuated whether I'm in the U.S. or whether I'm here. Yeah, I have like you're constantly like a chameleon. You're adapting as you go. When you say identity for a Sri Lankan, what does that, in your opinion, like what does that look like?
Well, it's about your passport is not something you can change. Like where you're born, you can't change, and your passport is also very hard to change. So, and if you have a negative view of where you're born, you can have a machoism. That's not what I'm saying. If you have a great appreciation of where you're born, that the place has value, that has culture, it has given. That is a silent strength that's inside of you. And when you're competing, and overseas in an international arena, you have to believe you can win.
Yes.
If you're going there thinking you're fighting for the second or third or fourth place, you've already lost.
Yeah.
Right. So we are not fighting for third place or second place. We are fighting for the win.
Yeah.
And you have to have great confidence that you have everything everybody else has too.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. I had a friend of mine that we were in Chicago, and I don't go clubbing and stuff, but they were all just like, hey, we're in town, so let's just go to the club. And so the first thing he said was, and this shook my mind because like you said, it's like when you think you're Sri Lankan, you have to keep it at a certain standard, right? So there's a long line of people, and he walks up to the bouncer guy and he said, hey buddy, I'm Sri Lankan. I'm not used to standing in lines. Can you let me in? And the guy was like, sure, sir. And he actually let this entire group of Sri Lankans in. And I was just like, wow, I really appreciate and would love to have that type of confidence. You know what I mean? It's true. it does for some people it's for their identity as a Sri Lankan, it's mixed because I think some of them have grown up elsewhere even though they were born in Sri Lanka, or maybe they might have been born elsewhere. They don't, if you were to put Sri Lanka in some sort of framework, can we actually do that? Can Sri Lanka be put into a framework as part of our culture of what we look and sound like?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of similarities that we share. We are in this, geographical, we are in South Asia. We have from weather to food to our value system, how our families are organized, how our burials are done, how our marriages are done, what we value and what we don't value. There's a lot of similarities, right? So, and it might be very different from say a Nordic country. So there are differences. You doesn't need to have to box, but what we are trying to do is to elevate so that we are in a level playing field.
Right.
From a confidence point of view, from anticipation of the future, optimism point of view.
Yeah.
Because, for example, today Sri Lanka is about maybe $3,000 per GDP per capita, right? Say US is about 65,000. Singapore is around 70, 80,000, maybe around that rate. So if you're thinking, wow, we are 15 times poorer than US, on average, right? And if you don't believe that we could actually catch up, why would you even be here, right? And what we are saying is, that you can. There's lots of other benefits here that we can build, that our economies can also, and our lifestyles, our quality of life, all of that can be grown, not in 1 or 2 years, but over essentially a generation, maybe about 25-30 years, you can actually get great distance.
Right. So there's people like you and me that have invested our time, come back and really believe in Sri Lanka and believe in investing our time and our efforts to grow our brands, like you with LOVI, and then me taking on iFilm Sri Lanka, the film component. Do you think that also, government does play a role in terms of like us actually moving forward as a people?
I think governments definitely help, because through both tax policy as well as regional policies, even simply licensing definitely plays a role. But I think there's a lot of space within even the current framework that the individuals and corporations, this is open economy, and it is, I think, a relatively flexible, fair, open economy. You can do a great deal without actually, lot more support from the government. I think, frankly, I feel like, the government is actually doing a fairly good job with the resources it has to maintain and create, with the challenges it had, and, and even the anticipated challenges.
Yeah.
There are worse governments and better governments, but I don't think overall it's we have a lot that's going for us.
Yeah. Just going back to what you were saying earlier, I really like how you put, we don't fit in a framework, even though we have references of where we come from. You're constantly trying to innovate and like bring our Sri Lankan brand anew every single time. Can you talk to me about how you're looking, because you do have like traditional aspects with like your clothing, but you're also kind of like bringing a new look and feel to it at the same time.
Absolutely.
Can you walk me through that process of like how you went through that?
It's part of designing, right? And you have to know, if you want to take a group of people on a distance, you can't, from a mind point of view, it's very hard to jump 10 years. A good example is like, say, concept cars. Concept cars for EV electronic vehicles came maybe 20 years ago. It has taken us roughly about 20 years to make it a reality, right? Where you can see more and more of them on the street itself.
Yeah.
So even with clothing or any element, I might think of Sri Lankan identity clothing that's like 10 years out. But for us to operationally do it, or it just needs to be progressed over time.
Right.
So, but as long as we are innovating, as long as we are going towards that kind of goal, and with it's the values that's driving our design. It's not the other way around.
Right.
We value innovation. We value, cultural integrity. We value unity. We value optimism. These values are built into our clothing, and the design is whatever comes.
Yeah.
What is LOVI and not LOVI is defined by the values, not by the design.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's a good one.
That's the filter.
Yeah.
It needs to pass the LOVI filter for it to come out, and the LOVI filter is essentially the value system we have about Sri Lanka.
That's awesome. And so you're having these designs come out every year. I like that.
Oh, every 3-4 months.
Every 3-4 months as of late. And do you have to are you constantly pushing that threshold of what that filter is, or are you reading the market and be like, oh, okay, maybe Sri Lanka's not ready for this type of design, and do you kind of hold back?
Actually, it's more like getting the tools. It's the filter is not actually changing. It's like, because but as we are growing, we are building capability, right? So another way to do it, if you're an athlete, as more you say power lifter, the more you train, the higher you can lift, right? So we have to internally build the capabilities, from embroidery to stitching to better quality of fabrics, all of those capabilities internally for us to come up and execute. I might have the view of this design that's coming out maybe even 5 years ago, but it took me 5 years to build the internal capability for us to actually execute it and get it.
Nice.
But the filter remains the same.
Right.
That's why it feels consistent. If you look at whatever we've done, it looks like from the same company.
Right. And you do have a lot of international interest for LOVI as a brand.
Well, I don't know whether it's a lot or not, but we have international.
It's a lot. I know it's a lot.
Because we are thrilled about being Sri Lankan, being able to come up with this kind of an idea. We love being here. I love being here. It's a beautiful place. It's safe, exciting, optimistic. There's great relationships. Great weather, great food. I mean, what more you want?
Fair enough. It is very hard to beat, especially like mangoes. Man, every time I come back, I'm one of those guys that eat over the sink with the mango.
Yes, that's the best way to do it. Much less mess.
Absolutely. So talk to me about like LOVI again, like when you guys scaled up from when you started involving more people. You didn't actually build a factory, right? Yeah. You kind of worked with, local seamstresses. And
everything about LOVI is we are trying to be a Sri Lankan company. So even fabric we are making, maybe about very large percentage of our fabric is made by LOVI itself.
Right.
And most of it is internal.
Okay.
So we are a relatively vertically integrated company, to use a technical term, meaning that we make design, we make fabric, we make our own stitching, we do our own marketing, we sell in our own shops. So overall, we are, that we are building. Mm-hmm. So scaling wise, I feel, when the products are good, naturally they will find somewhat scale. In Silicon Valley, there's a saying that don't scale a bad problem. So you have to get the products good and the quality and the improvement, and when it'll find its own natural scale.
Right. And that we're not seeing LOVI's, branch out to Bangladesh or something to get its work done.
No. I mean, what our idea is, it's not because Bangladesh is, any less or any more.
Yeah.
It's just that what we are trying to do is to be able to not only create clothes, but create the business model where you could actually create this stuff and provide employment to Sri Lankans, that meaningful employment where they are making at least a middle class living.
Yeah.
Right. And can we create a business model where the products provide enough margin and enough income for the people who are making them
Yes.
to live a decent life.
That's great. Finding your next nutrient-dense meal is really tough when you're on the road or you're working really long hours during filmmaking season or whatever it is that you're doing. KION has been with me since day one with its essential amino acids or its whey protein. I'm feeling great 100% while I'm on the road. So if you want to check him out, hit him up on KION.com. The link is in the description below, or use the coupon code Jason plus KION for your goodness on your next basket. Would it be a goodness basket? It's a goodness basket. KION.com. When we talk about the culture itself, you're trying to inadvertently export our culture internationally through, and you're using this catalyst of like clothing to the world. Like, how's that been working out for you so far? Like, have you seen more of like a nationalistic or like a patriotic kind of your clientele kind of being like, oh, this is great because now I feel like I'm connected to Sri Lanka in some way? Or like, what is the feedback you've been getting from like the clothing going international?
It's not necessarily we are trying to get people to be patriotic or nationalistic or anything like that, but generally people like to express themselves, and especially if you can provide where they can express themselves proudly of where they are from or where their family is from or their heritage, it gives an opportunity for them to experience that. And I think, with LOVI we are created and we are creating products that you can be proudly Sri Lankan. And it is not a nationalistic or patriotic or racist kind of an idea. This is a very inclusive, cosmopolitan idea. And we have to be very careful not to get to, become that. It just like we are focused, not even if we sell to many people, we are focused about one person who's buying. I never think about all the other people who are buying. I'm thinking about, if I'm making your outfit, I'm thinking about you. Right? If I'm making an outfit, I'm thinking about that person. What is that person able to kind of achieve? How much happiness that person is going to get when they wear this out and everybody's like, where did you get this from? Where are you from? Like that conversation.
So there's some sort of, one of the main focuses with me with film is that there has to be some way to kind of bring some of the Sri Lankans back in some form, back to their roots, back to their country in some way, because some of them have, with our past, our history, people have kind of diverted away into different identities, and they've kind of removed themselves from a Sri Lankan identity. And so I could definitely see how clothing can slowly, like, it's one piece of art that can definitely start bringing them back in, seeing what Sri Lanka is about, that it's all about inclusivity and unity, and definitely bring them back in some way.
And also when you present it in a way that people can approach it, right? So if you present it in a way, Sri Lanka, that it's something to be proud of, that their connection to Sri Lanka is something to be proud of, then automatically people will find their ways of, because identity is fluid, right? When Sri Lankan cricket is winning, many people join into supporting them. When we are not doing sometimes very good, people are like, but it happens. It's okay. It's fluid. It's the reality. So the more we do to make them feel proud, the more they can themselves connect to that flow.
Absolutely. I like that you said that. Because it is fluid, and it should be.
It should be.
Right.
Because if you're in Colombo and then you move to Chicago, you can't necessarily have your identity be only. It'll have another layer of what is to be in Chicago.
Absolutely.
And that's a way to kind of really adapt to that culture and also take all the beautiful things about the Chicago culture.
Right.
Like freezing cold and deep dish pizza.
It's very obvious that America has won the culture wars over the past like century. How do you see Sri Lanka actually getting to the top at some point? Is it just through clothing, but there's other means to get up there too?
Not. I wouldn't even say America has won the culture war. I would say it's representing itself, and people choose whether they wanted to be participating in it or not. And the more open and honest that we represent ourselves, and more widely we can distribute that idea of what it is to be, then more people may decide that they want to be, associated with Sri Lanka. I think, so it's not necessarily forcing anybody or even a competition. It's just like, for us, one of the challenges is very few people know about Sri Lanka, outside of few headlines, and they really don't even know where it's on the map. So awareness is actually a big issue. And what is our culture look like? I think many people think Sri Lanka is kind of, if they've been to India, they probably think that it's somewhat like India, and
By association,
by association, because it's in similar direction, similar kind of thing. But so it's creating that awareness that what are the differences, how it looks, how it feels, all of that. And I think this is where, now that we are much more digitally connected and the distribution cost of information is much less, we have a real chance of exporting culture. Through film, through music, through art, through theater, through all kinds of digitally distributable products. We can create not only employment and export revenue, but it can also kind of have the renaissance in our own culture, because the artists who are performing and doing that can actually make a livelihood. Right? We are, for many artists over here, realistically, we are in a relatively small economy with 20 million people, and out of that, the disposable income for people to consume all of that is quite limited. But now imagine if you been able to open that to another 200 million. That's 10x, right? So, that opportunity is there. And we see examples of the other way, Hollywood, Bollywood, even recently K-pop, Japanese movies. Now, huge amount of Chinese movies and digital content coming. So those kind of avenues are coming, and a lot of it is happening, and it's happening in Sri Lanka.
We're working on something together. Why don't we touch base on that for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're working on a film that you had the idea of producing, and we had a friend of ours kind of write a framework of a script. And it was a very short film, like a pilot episode, more like a pilot episode, called 2048.
That's right.
Well, it's not the actual title, it's a working title. Oops. But it had in mind that what Sri Lanka could potentially look like in the future. Can you tell me about that? Like, why you as a tailor, is that the right way?
Perfectly okay. I tailor, yes. The clothes needs tailoring.
A high-end tailor.
No, just tailor is all good.
Got into film. But why would you even divert?
Same mission. Our mission, or my mission to be here, is to kind of show, I believe Sri Lanka could be a great economic powerhouse. And the way to kind of, the movie set in future, 25 years from now, at the century of independence for Sri Lanka, is to show that how we can be actually a developed country with about $40,000 per capita GDP. It's very specific. And if you want to have that kind of rapid development, how do you really, it's one way is to show that we could get here, and what are paths to get there. Because the truth is, we have to find and enable about, 100,000 people to go make beautiful, great, exciting companies. And if you do that, we will get there. And 100,000 people is still very small number in a 25 million people population. But it takes about 25 years to do it. You can't, make these kind of companies in a day, right? So that's why the urgency to start, and being able to show what the future can look like would hopefully enable a lot of people to imagine what their part and what their role and the path they might take in it.
Absolutely. It definitely gives them some sort of reference and a framework to look ahead. When I like
Wouldn't that
you're-
be great, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Because not everyone thinks 10 years from now. Some people, unfortunately, it is for some to all think about the tomorrow and,
Yeah.
and where their next meal is coming from at this point, or how they're gonna help their company actually stay afloat
Yeah.
over the next month. And so, giving that type of vision would actually just like expand their capacity of thinking as well through a film.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with the current film industry and the type of content coming out, but I do think if we stick around with that type of content that's existing right now, like the films that come out of Sri Lanka, that we would all stay in that same mindset of just we'll just be stagnant. I don't think there's anything progressive coming out, to be honest. Not that there's anything wrong. It's just not doing anything.
Yeah, I honestly don't know enough to know about the content that's coming out to comment. But what I know is for myself personally and for LOVI, the mission is to kind of build a great, beautiful Sri Lanka, right? And in that mission, we are going to approach it in as many parts, in film, in fashion, in theater, in books, in as many mediums as possible to get this message to mobilize and enable and excite the people to go build a great Sri Lanka.
Right. So could you explain to me the story? That's a very good political answer. I love it. Could you explain to me the brief story of 2048 of what you
absolutely. So I mean, the idea is like, how do you now if you realistically look from say $3,000 to $4,000 to $40,000 in 25 years, that's the 10x growth. And that's there's very few countries who have done it, but all of the countries who have done it we can learn from, and the countries who have attempted and failed also we can learn from.
Right.
And one of the things is to look at what kind of major trends that are coming, so that you can bootstrap to you anchor to that trend and you ride that wave, right? So if you look at what are big trends that are happening, we have we are an island, next stop is Antarctica, so in front of a vast ocean. So anything to do with climate change or ocean rising, all of that will have great effects on us as a country, as a people, as an economy, all of that. Are we preparing for that? And because that opportunity is there, not only for this region, Bangladesh is largely below sea level. So if even a slight increase in sea levels would essentially make Bangladesh inhabitable. Where would those people go? Right? Maldives, all these countries that are low-lying areas. So we have, interesting challenges coming potentially. And this is a wave. There's a lot of discussion, not only in Sri Lanka, but all around the world. We just had, I think, COP28 and, lots of these summits happening. So it's a trend, and there is also a lot of money involved in that trend. And that is the kind of money that we can use to invest into our economy to grow at a rapid pace, because we are still a very small economy. So even a little bit of money for many other countries, what would be a little bit of money is quite big money over here if you invest it, right? And invest it wisely. So these opportunities are there, because many times when you have a development conversation, you're saying, where's the money coming from, right?
Right.
So there is money. We have to find it. We have to be smart about it. But why wouldn't we do it?
Just going back to like sustainability perspective of like in your field, clothing as well. Like
Yes.
I have a thing where when I look at farming, I think of like how cash crops are. It's great because you can export a lot outside of the country, but it's also like kind of the soil health kind of like erodes slowly as you make something like a cash crop.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're worried about in terms of exporting? And yes, you mentioned culture, but it's also like tangible, like clothing,
Product,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So do you have concern of that at all? For Sri Lanka?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have concern of this. And if even when, we look at sustainability, you have to kind of, it's a big word bounced around a lot.
Mhm.
So at LOVI, we look at it in, essentially a couple of ways. One is environmental sustainability. What are we doing to the environment? Over there, one large problem with environmental sustainability is we don't know what to do with the waste, right? Because people wear clothes and they throw it. And, especially polyester clothes, it comes in many names,
Yeah.
dry fit, this, that, and the other, is essentially do not decompose.
Right.
It'll
It takes like 5 years or something, right?
500 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I got 2 zeros out. Wow.
Yeah. So it will take like 500 years for polyester to, essentially, and even then it doesn't actually go to dust.
Right.
It goes to smaller and smaller and smaller particles, right? So that is the environmental challenge we are working with, and there are a lot of innovation that's happening on how to mitigate that.
Right.
So one of the challenges with fast fashion, because the underlying fabric for fast fashion is polyester, it's creating vast amount of this byproduct that we don't know what to do with. But there are lots of smart people and working on how to kind of challenge it. But for LOVI, we've decided to minimize polyester. We work in natural fibers that, like cotton or linen or silks, that generally within a few months or to 1 year, it just disintegrates and becomes dust.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean that growing cotton or growing silk doesn't have its own problems.
Right.
It's a different set of problems.
Right.
Right. The second part of sustainability is, are you actually creating value for the people? Economic sustainability. Are you creating value that people who are working can have an improvement in their life, or
Right.
are you creating a cycle of essentially everlasting poverty? Right. So for that, the challenge is to create high value added products where there's enough money coming to pay the people who are creating a decent amount of salary so that they can have a better life. Now, this question also should be addressed, because look at around, next time you're talking to some of the people, see how much they're paying for their employees.
Yep.
Especially at the bottom layer.
Absolutely.
And I think that's that is creating essentially a poverty cycle.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's a very dynamic view of.
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of what we are. We are a tiny little company, so we can experiment this. And I can tell you, we don't have the answer. We are experimenting, but at least we are valuing that to be our goal.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. That's great. I think it's really important for us to consider that Sri Lanka is still in that phase where you can actually experiment, try new things, and before it jumps on, like you were saying, some sort of trend that once we do, we're just like uphill skiing from there. Is it uphill or downhill? I don't know. One of the two. It's just like it's just going to pick up really fast. Where do you see Sri Lanka in the next year?
Sri Lanka is actually going quite well. I think it's stabilizing. It has stabilized actually from some of the shocks we had, the economic shocks and COVID shock and all of this. I think we are set pretty well for bright 5-10 years at least. Good run. I am very optimistic about it, but we have to look at that large part of our economy is not government control. It's private control. Our GDP is 80%, 70% of it is privately generated. So instead of focusing on, trying to optimize how the government is spending the money, let's focus on the 80% that, we actually individually control, and see how we can get our companies to grow 5% more faster, 10% more faster. Because if our companies are not growing faster, it's not creating the jobs that are needed for the newcomers to the labor market to get in.
Right.
So, and that creates a lot of pressure on the politicians, because they have to find, all these people some kind of job, because otherwise they won't be able to live, right? So, it's connected. It's easy to kind of
Point fingers.
point fingers,
Yeah.
but let's see, can you talk to your board? Can you figure out, can you work out a plan where you're growing 3% more faster or 5% more faster than you have already projected?
Yeah. That's one thing you and I have in common, is that we're really looking at corporates shaping the future for now.
It
as
is,
opposed to-
it's a open economy. It's a
Absolutely.
democracy. It has a fairly robust legal framework. It has a 200, 300-year history of corporate accounts, right? The companies have from commercial bank to Lipton to all these companies have, from Golf Face Hotel, all these companies have existed for 150 years or more.
Right.
So we have a fairly large, robust legal basis for companies to operate. Let's see how can we grow our companies a little bit more faster.
Absolutely, I agree. And I always saw that LOVI is definitely one of those brands that's just looking past the current state of affairs and just always looking towards the future, which is something that I embody with my companies as well, just so that we can actually help people at the end of the day, help our neighbors to actually have a better and brighter future. That sounded like a commercial.
Yeah, that sounded like a very big political speech.
That did. Yikes. But thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both of us have the benefit of having lived in many places.
Yes.
There are every place that has its own set of problems, and every place that have their own set of opportunities, and this, we are blessed to be in this place. And I feel every day I actually wake up and be excited and blessed and really kind people. First of all, we have no petty crime. We don't have lots of challenges that many other countries are facing.
Absolutely.
Right? So let's go build a
bigger, brighter future.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not like the mentality right now is, we need to skip the country and go live somewhere else. And that's what I face. Like when I talk to a lot of individuals, it's we're looking for greener pastures. But what you just said,
it's true. There's an economic activity, like $3,000 per capita versus $65,000 per capita. So the disposable income and the strength of that economy is vast. There's a huge difference. And it's not a bad idea for some people to go and experience, and we've both done it.
Yeah.
Right. And part of our benefit is we have that view of what is also good and bad in all these places.
Right.
So, but we can, now it gives us a way to be optimistic about how much we can do.
Right. Absolutely. I definitely agree. Yeah. And I really hope that like this little piece of content of us doing something together just opens up a spark in somebody to see the world a little bit differently, see Sri Lanka a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And then take
lots
pride
of
in
cool things are happening here,
Mm-hmm.
So come back and help.
Wait,
help
get a close up of that, because that's a good commercial of itself. Like, come back to Sri Lanka.
Yeah, come back, build all the things that you bring, all the things you've learned and excited about. Build a great company. Build a great company that can achieve your dreams and the dreams of many others.
Thank you, Asanka. Okay, yep. He's got to add that on. Well, thank you again for your time. I truly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
It's always a pleasure every time we hang out, and I look forward to our next chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.